for the scientific community to understand, or for that matter any innovator to understand, that it's not just solving a problem, ensuring that that doesn't create another problem is the biggest challenge for them.
Thank you for joining Change I Am Possible, India's first future tech podcast. Do kindly subscribe and share. So today we have with us Dr. Shrikar Dole. He is a passionate advocate of partnering with business and society while recognizing the SDG framework using circular economy. Currently, he is the founder, CEO of SDG Foundation. I wish you enjoy this conversation.
Change is affecting us drastically at this point in time. Just recently, Rajasthan's Churu topped the hottest amongst the hottest cities in the world with a maximum temperature of somewhere around 50.3 degrees. Air pollution has caused somewhere around 1.2 million deaths in India in the year 2017, according to the data, whatever I checked. There's a water crisis in Chennai as we speak. Are we paying a big price for our ignorance?
Yes, and no as well. Yes, because climate change is something that is happening, has been happening over a long period of time, and this very slow pace of the climate change does not reflect in our day-to-day life, and therefore we are kind of unaware of it. But if you see the scientific community, they have been warning the governments around the globe on climate change for the past few years, past few decades actually. And finally the UN took the cognizance and established an environmental platform where the scientists from all over the world gathered with their knowledge and said that the government should do something about reversing this climate change position. So the first benchmark that was established was that the global warming should not exceed beyond 1.5 degrees. But that's already we have already reaching there. In next probably 2 to 5 years you will see, and which is why you see the temperatures that you spoke about in Churu. And this is not going to be an exception. This is going to be more of a norm as we go forward, because the way we have been we have designed our economies. There is a term that economists use called linear economy, which means we extract things, we manufacture things, we consume things, and we throw it into the waste. And the nature does not do that actually. Nature, if you see, anything that goes as a waste into the nature actually becomes a nutrient in the nature and comes back something else. So the last 5 years or 7 years or so, the people have been talking about new way of economic life that is called circular economy. And a lot of emphasis has been given to create things that can be, once they are used by, past the human consumption, they can go back into the production cycle as a raw material. So that's why you see Bombay Municipal Corporation has asked the milk producers to stop using milk pouches, plastic milk pouches, because but that in immediate future is not possible. So the alternate has been that you collect all those plastic pouches and recycle them. Similar thing has been mandated for the bottled water companies. Now the bottled water companies have to collect the bottles. Of course, they can't use it as it is, so it will go into recycling process. So the bottle manufacturers can make fresh bottles out of the same material, so that it doesn't go into the environment. So there is a lot that is happening, but the pace of climate change is still surpassing the pace of change that is happening in our consumption patterns. And so it will take few years to stabilize the process. But by that time, I presume that we will be past 2 degree. And then
what's the impact of like a 2-degree environment?
The scientists say that the 2-degree threshold is when we will not be able to reverse back.
Wow.
But again, it's a very broad guesstimate.
Right, right.
You don't know. One can't predict the future.
Right.
But that because of this 2-degree change in the temperature, there are few resources that will start disappearing.
Right.
For example, water, pure drinking water. Now imagine you can't have life without water.
Exactly, exactly.
So there are few things that have been predicted as non-reversible in terms of resources the earth, nature or the earth has.
Right.
And therefore, the whole proposition of the various governments, the global United Nations, everybody is trying to see that the temperature remains below 1.5, which means you have to reduce your carbon consumption.
Right.
One of the biggest carbon footprint product is automobiles.
Automobiles, right.
And ironically, these companies are resisting the change into the technologies, simply because they see as their end of their way of doing business. But there are new companies happening. If you see Elon Musk, Tesla, the cars are coming. I mean, now everybody is trying to do. There is now new technology which is running cars on hydrogen. And surprisingly, the exhaust will be pure water. Because of the hydrogen being interacting with the atmosphere. So you will have a chemical heat producing electricity for the motor, cars motors, and then exhaust will be hydrogen and oxygen put together, so water. So there are now things are happening. I mean, but as I said, simply the pace at which the things are changing are still not really able to catch up with the changes in the climate,
impact which has already been happening.
So there are always two perspectives to looking at anything. So a pessimistic view or optimistic view. Pessimistic view is by 2050, life as we know would not be possible.
Cease to exist.
But I believe in human ingenuity, human's capacity to adapt. I mean, you will see the same biological human bodies living in North Pole conditions as in 51 degrees. And so we will start adapting to the nature's way, the way it impacts us. So I believe we will be there for a long time. Whether we can live the way we are living, I don't know that. But I think there is a lot of hope. The way the young generation has been creating new things. Industry of late has awakened and started looking at these new possibilities. But then again, what happens is when you innovate something, it takes time for it to stabilize, and then become a commercial activity. So maybe if we again meet 5 years down the line, probably we can review what we talked today and see whether it makes sense. But I'm very hopeful that yes.
Yeah, so am I. I mean, I'm very positive because I guess, I mean, we're living in a great time, and startups are growing more powerful than government. They're constantly innovating, they're solving problems. So what are the initiatives by the government? Are there initiatives which can be seen by a normal layperson, which is really slow and steadily but making change towards mitigating the climate risk?
Oh, there's a lot that is happening. In fact, United Nations has recognized India's efforts as a government level efforts to mitigate those positions. So solar power plants, the capacities are increasing
Right.
multifold
Right,
as
right.
against the conventional energy sources, and slowly but steadily it will eliminate the energy production from the conventional or carbon producing
Right.
sources. So that's a huge impact
Right,
on
right.
the carbon footprint of India. The agricultural initiatives, the forest initiatives. There are a lot of things that are, because what happens is we try to see things that are changing quickly in front of our eyes to
Right.
believe that the change is
Changes
happening.
are happening. So there's been work going on. It's just that's not visible at this point in time to us.
It's not visible because the impact is not
Yeah,
visible.
it's going to take a period of time to actually.
Exactly. And it's not just the Indian government, the
Yeah.
government around the world, except probably US as of now,
Right. No, that's
which is not believing that climate change
Yeah.
is something that is nature. They firmly believe as a Catholics that it's the God's way of punishing human population. I don't know.
And I believe they're the highest polluter, one of the highest.
They are, of course, they are the
Right.
most industrialized nation, so they are highest polluters. They are actually biggest waste producers in the world.
Right.
Uh, per capita waste generated in US is highest.
Right.
India, of course, because of the number of the amount of population we
Right.
have, quantum population we have, we produce equally big amount of waste.
Right.
But our per capita waste is
much lesser than them. Yeah.
And the same goes with the carbon footprint.
Right.
So, on an individual level, you can actually be more satisfied that we are more sustainable people.
Right.
But the fact that we are so many people,
Right, that
makes it very difficult to for the governments to manage things.
Right,
and that's why we see waste all over the places.
Right.
Simply because there are, even if you put waste bins, how many waste bins are required to cater to 1.3 billion
1.3 billion. It's growing.
Yeah, and it's growing. So one of the big concerns or the recent concerns for the government is population control.
Right. So tell me, the government has actually at this point in time have set out these agendas with 2030 for electric vehicles, even for solar panel. I mean, is there any initiative that you would want to talk about which the government is doing and we are unaware and you would like to bring light to the audience?
No, rooftop solar. That's the next big thing that is happening. Slowly and steadily, within Mumbai, it's not visible because it's on rooftops.
Right.
But if you take an aerial view, you will realize that a lot of rooftops are now
already.
Yes,
that's
solar
brilliant.
Panels. Commercial spaces, especially. Housing societies are not so much.
Right.
But I am sure there is a rooftop policy by the national government and the state government that should encourage societies to go for the solar rooftops, so that all housing electrical needs are met by themselves.
My building, my society. I mean, there's been, obviously there was this circular out that you should segregate the dry and wet waste. It just happened for a very short period, and again it's gone back. But even the ones who collected, they mix it up. So there is a problem.
That's the kind of observation we make for us not to segregate. The more we start engaging ourselves with that, understanding that this is for our good. Forget how much money it makes, or forget how smelly it is. How good it is for us. The moment we
that's more
start
important.
realizing that, we will do it
Completely.
Then we will not point finger at the waste collector.
Right.
That he is mixing everything.
Right.
Because then it will not happen.
Right.
So everything you can not depend on the government to do.
Right. I guess, but there's a natural tendency.
We not for our own sake. So
right.
I don't see the logic that no, the government is. So even the rooftop solar, the big problem why it is not taking off is because government is not doing anything.
Right.
And the societies are expecting the government should do things.
Right.
Why?
Yeah. The change needs to happen from you need to change, and then eventually.
Exactly. So, but I'm sure in Germany, if you go, the rooftops in every household is actually producing so much energy now that they are selling it back to the electric companies.
Back to the grid. So, see, as a passionate crusader for the environment, I mean, your company, I mean, can you share more details about SDG and its vision?
So SDG Foundation has a board which is a global board,
Right, right.
and it came when I was working with these universities in US and Europe, and I realized that these scientists who are so brilliant and working in the university labs, creating new research, are not able to visualize how this will impact the real world.
Right.
Not because they are not smart,
Right.
because simply they don't have the experience or the capacity to go in that direction. So I know somebody who has been in 40 years in water sector and has done brilliant work in the water sector. And I met such different scientists from different sciences,
Right.
and they all say that we have done enough to do things, but it's not making sense.
Right.
And then we realize that because we are looking at the science in isolations,
Right.
in their own kind of silos, in the real world, the nature has all sciences interacting with each other.
With each other, right.
The water, the air,
Right.
the earth, and so on and so forth.
Yeah,
so
it's a complete
everything
synergy. Yeah.
kind of is synergistic,
Yeah.
which is not what the current or the earlier trend
Right,
was,
right.
that we would develop something that we thought solves a problem.
Right.
And beyond that, we didn't look. Once we decided that it solves this problem, we didn't try to see whether that solution is now creating another problem. So because we didn't look at that, we started producing things on that basis. For example, automobile is a very great example. We wanted to go from place A to place B. The most sustainable was in those days was the horse cart
Horse
or
cart.
the animal
Right,
cart,
right,
which
right.
was very good, but
Right.
it was slow.
Right.
We wanted to go fast, so
Right.
we created automotive.
Right.
And today, that is the biggest contributor on our carbon
Yeah.
footprint,
Right.
emissions.
Right.
So it's just, this is, you need now people to realize, for the scientific community to understand, or for that matter any innovator to understand, that it's not just solving a problem.
Right.
Ensuring that that doesn't create another problem
Right.
is the biggest challenge for them.
Right.
Because the moment that they decide that my innovation is creating a solution,
Right.
they immediately should see whether that solution is creating another
Problem.
If not, then they have a sustainable
Right.
innovation.
Right.
Because then you are not creating more problem into the climate change story of the world. You are actually trying to resist or restrict it to a level. And that's how it should be actually. All innovations, all ideas now need to be looked at from the sustainability perspective.
Right. Right.
Everything we do needs to be sustainable in that term.
Right.
Otherwise, that solution has no future.
Right. Right. So your foundation SDG. What are the programs that you build?
So I left my foundation story halfway through and got into something else. So the foundations, all our board members are experts from their own scientific, and then we realized that we need to do something that creates a platform where all sciences can interact.
Right.
And this just happened to have also coincide with UN's declaration of sustainable
SDG.
development goal.
Right.
So the idea is same.
Right.
So we decided to name it SDG Foundation.
Right.
And what we see now,
is this by any chance any partnership with the UN, or is it a standalone body?
It's a standalone thing. It is independent of the UN SDGs. It's just that the name became common.
Right.
So when we decided to come together, we looked at problems in different spheres of life.
Right.
So we looked at uh, society at large,
Right.
and we looked at companies in specific. We realized that the amount of carbon footprint created or emission created by the society at large is higher than companies probably, but the density is much more in corporate sector than in because not every human is creating same amount of emission.
Right.
So if you go to a very small village, probably they have a very less emission.
Right. Right.
So it's not the same for every individual.
Right.
So and tackling society challenges are a huge challenge. The UN, the governments, everybody is working on that. So we thought we should focus on corporate sustainability.
Right.
It has two advantages, it creates two benefits for us as a foundation. One is that corporate entities are more controllable entities.
Right.
Society is not a controllable entity.
True.
And so it's easy to implement,
Right.
easy to act upon some solutions,
Right.
and B, equally easy to measure the impact.
Right. Right.
In society, if you want to measure the impact, you will find as horrifyingly statistically impossible situation. Whereas in corporates, you can immediately measure the impact of the change that you have created. So our focus is on corporate sustainability. So I was reading a case study on net, and it said a T-shirt actually requires about 1,000 liters of water to produce.
Wow.
Now imagine that, and the way we keep changing our T-shirts. Imagine how many liters of water, 1,000 liters of water we are wasting in that process. Obviously, it is also related to the consumption habit of the individuals.
Right.
So I have seen people who change their T-shirts every quarter because the fashion has changed.
Right.
The color preferences have changed, and so they change.
Right.
But they don't care what happens to their old clothes.
Right.
Because it goes into waste.
Right.
The entire value is destroyed.
Right.
There is a need to understand how this can stop.
Right.
Can that old T-shirt go back into the production facility after recycling? If yes, then you have a sustainable T-shirt on your hand.
Right.
At least in terms of raw materials.
Right.
If not water or chemicals or other elements. But you have to start thinking in those
Yeah,
lines.
exactly.
So this is what the whole objective of the foundation has been, to help people understand where the future is for them.
Right.
Sustainability should now get integrated into the core activities of our businesses.
Yeah, I guess once we start thinking like that, we'll make a better planet, and a product which is really serves its purpose. I mean, really serves the customer. In foreign countries, I mean, like maybe they don't have factories inside city limits. They're always outside city limits. But then we have these big factories polluting Bombay. We have these landfills which have fires, which then the smog is toxic. I know it gets very difficult for the government to look at all of these, but is it something which they should look at, or they should?
No, if you see the government systems, there is a environmental law.
Right.
There are regulations in place
Right.
for a polluting company to close down.
Right.
They will lock down that company.
Right.
So it's not that the government is not doing things.
Right.
Government is doing things. It's for us to decide whether what we are doing is good forget others, for me.
Right.
So if I am polluting an area,
Right.
I mean, like the example you gave, a factory working in an area, if it is polluting, you think it's just polluting the outside environment?
The entire
polluting inside environment.
Yeah, but people don't
polluting
get that.
the managing director of the company.
Right. Yeah.
He is also facing the same.
Right.
So unless he realizes that this is bad for me,
Right.
he will not be able to see it is bad for others.
Right.
It's just,
Yeah,
I mean, it's just one area. You can
Right.
imagine if going to work on cycle.
Right.
It's not, yeah, of course, you won't reach faster. You will
Right.
take a little more time, but it will be a very good exercise. So you will be healthy
Right.
and you will not produce any carbon.
Right, completely. So, would you like talk more about circular economy? And on your LinkedIn profile, I read sustainable mining. How is there like a mismatch between circular economy and sustainable mining? Or
Well, it's a kind of dichotomy. You rightly pointed.
right,
First, you have to understand that
Mm.
circular economy talks about resource
right,
being used in a cycle.
right,
So they are extracted, they are used for manufacturing, then they are consumed, then it becomes post-consumption,
right, right,
what we currently call as waste,
right,
and therefore thrown away.
right,
It's a post-consumption material used in recycling process to go back into the production cycle. So imagine if you have a mined ore, say iron.
right,
You keep mining iron,
right,
you keep making steel and steel products, and then you throw them into dump
right,
because for you it is waste.
right,
If they do not go back into the production cycle, there will come a time when the earth will hold no iron ore
right,
because you have started extracting everything.
right.
There is a finite
Amount of resources. Right,
Correct.
right,
So you will have to think on those lines. So in that sense, circular economy talks about using the same material again,
right,
so that you don't have to mine.
right,
But mining business will say, if you don't mine, where is my business?
right,
So in that sense, there is a dichotomy. But it doesn't mean, see, you have to realize circular economy, when it says that resources need to be recycled, there is a simple physics law which says everything will not go back 100%.
Right.
There will be some change of form because of the energy or the processes. So you will not recover 100% back into the production cycle. So
Right.
there will always be some requirement to mine these ores. Meaning today, if that mine has a life of 50 years of production, it will become 150 years more sustainable. But at the same time, you will start working on materials that doesn't require iron,
right,
like say carbon fiber. Imagine tomorrow if you could capture all the carbon emission
right,
and turn it into a carbon fiber,
right,
which is stronger than steel,
right,
then you don't need steel.
right. Yeah.
So it all this is how you will have to look at things and decide whether I should continue in this business or not.
Right. Technology is impacting all verticals, and it's upending us, augmenting us. Do you think technology holds a solution in kind of reversing this climate risk? Because I'm a huge fan of Peter Diamandis, and he's got various prizes, foundations like X Prize, where they're talking about carbon capture, like you mentioned. They're talking about desalination, and there is various. They're talking about pulling out water out of moisture. Yeah. So there are a lot of these tech companies who are trying to build solutions which can solve all these problems that we are in at this point in time. Do you think tech is an answer to?
No, for me, human ingenuity is the answer.
Right.
Technology is just an form of expression in that
Right.
process.
Right.
And it is, one has to understand, technology cannot provide all the answers.
Right.
It can provide some answers,
Right.
a large number of answers,
Yeah.
but it cannot provide all the answers.
Right.
So in some cases, that is why you have to look at yourself at the end of the day,
Right.
as an individual, to say, am I contributing to the problem or am I not contributing? Forget reversing, because as an individual, you probably cannot do enough
Right.
to reverse the process. but at least not contribute.
Right, completely. So in the beginning, you mentioned that by 2050, most of our natural resources will be completely depleted. You mentioned water being one of
Not
the
most thing, but in case of water, there was a recent prediction which said that by 2020, 40% less drinking water will be
right, that
available, and by 2030, hardly any water will be available
right,
in India.
right,
I'm not talking about the world. World
right,
will have water. And there are two reasons why this kind of things is being said. Is one is this requirement is increasing because of the population.
right, right.
Imagine if you have 500 million less population,
Mm.
then that water will remain for other
Mm.
at least billion people to
Mm.
drink. But because our population is increasing, the demand is increasing,
Right,
and at the same time we are polluting our water bodies.
completely.
So we are destroying our water sources, and then we are creating more water demand.
Do you think there is a lack of these forums where you need there has got to be like a very serious conversation where you also engage the general public and make them aware about this implication which is coming if we don't. I'm sure you would want to spread awareness about the climate change. You see a lack of these platforms, or are there?
No, there are plenty of discussions happening,
Right.
and the discussions are happening in the scientific community, in the government, and the so-called expert.
Right. But does it fizzle out? Does it need to
No,
actually
because
come down to
it actually gets involved in a language which is too scientific for a common people to understand.
understand?
But it's not just that.
Right.
There is now a
Right.
very serious effort happening to at least educate the children.
Right.
So the junior schools, I mean the middle school and below that, primary schools, there is now a huge emphasis on environmental education. And I'm sure if you look around, you will find the young generation is more environmentally conscious than us. But now the young generation is pretty much, of course, they are still far away from comprehending the fact that what you are doing on a day-to-day basis
Right.
is actually creating more problem. The moment they start realizing that,
Right.
they will start adapting themselves to the requirement of being sustainable.
Completely. You
Because
mentioned.
now at least the awareness is being
Right.
created.
Right. Right.
In my time there was no
No
awareness,
awareness. Right.
and hence there was no consciousness. See, you will not understand things that you are not exposed to,
Right.
which
Right.
is a simple fact.
Right. So there's this Chinu Quatra. He has cleared somewhere around 300 tons of garbage in 45 weeks in Dadar. Then Afroz Shah,
Yeah.
who has spearheaded the Warsaw Beach cleanup drive and is now on a mission to clean Mumbai's Methi River. Kalpana Ramesh has educated and convinced the people of Hyderabad to take up rainwater harvesting and recycling. Individuals over here seems to be driving the conversation.
The way forward.
Yeah, that's
That
the
is
way
forward.
Right.
Simply because
Right.
all of these individuals are not doing these miracles on their own.
Right.
They are actually involving
Community.
people in that
Community. Yeah, full community is coming
So
together.
the moment the community is energized, it's very, I mean, it's not surprising then.
Right.
What was impossible to fathom
Right.
for, say, a chief engineer of a municipal corporation, all the beaches were dirty and they couldn't find a solution. This guy,
Right.
who is basically a lawyer, isn't it?
He's a lawyer.
If I'm not
Yeah,
he's a lawyer, but
Right.
he has that environmental consciousness,
Right.
and he has the drive to involve the community in the
Right.
process. He could create those miracles.
Right. Yeah.
So it's possible. Miracles are possible in this field
Right.
because those individuals are driven.
Right.
Which is very important for you to be in the process, and B, they understood very early that community needs to get engaged in the process. You cannot have solutions that is devised by me in an air-conditioned cabin.
Right.
That needs to be devised on the ground by the people for themselves. The moment that happens, the effectiveness changes. the impact changes. And that's why you will see probably if approach sustains this effort,
Right.
the Mithi River will be a river.
Right, completely.
Not an
And I really, I mean, that's a very positive note. And yeah, I wish that happens, because at this point in time, it's completely choked and it smells. And I mean, I would love to see actually a river than this sludge at this point in time. You know, maybe in the near future, maybe there'll be couples possibly boating down that river, and it'll just beautify the place. You know, and yeah.
By the way, do you know there is a Mithi River Authority
Yeah.
in the government of India?
Right.
I mean, in the state government,
Right.
there is an authority who is supposed to revive the Mithi River,
Right.
and they have a huge budget.
Right.
But because they sit in the air-conditioned cabins,
Right.
find solutions on their own,
Right.
the community living on the river is
Right.
not engaged,
Right.
and therefore they keep polluting the same river that you keep cleaning.
Right.
So every year you clean up, throughout the year it gets again dirty.
Right.
Because you are not engaging them in the process. Where does this dirt comes in the river?
Right.
All this muck that you see in the river, Mithi River,
Mm.
is not you and I go into the river,
Right.
but these people living
Right.
next
Right.
to that river,
Right.
who are the reasons why it is getting dirty.
Right.
If they decide not to dirty it,
Right.
then they will not allow others to come and dirty it,
Right.
because then it becomes their lifeline.
Right. Right.
And the
Completely.
moment it becomes their lifeline, then you will see a drastic. So that's what I'm saying. The miracles are possible.
Right.
The only way is engaging community. Why foundation found it very difficult?
Right.
Because to engage communities, to energize communities, you need a different sort of person, if I could say. I
Right.
will not say, because when we talk about it, we talk in a different way.
Right.
They talk in a different way.
Right.
And that's the big difference that is happening,
Right.
because of which these changes that you see
Right.
are happening over a period of shorter period of time.
Right. Right.
I could, as a scientific expert, talk about Mithi River and process and everything. So I don't know whether in some places they build the wall on the river,
Right.
which is actually not naturally good for a river.
Okay.
If you build a wall, then what will happen is that water seeping into the soil stops,
Right.
and then the water retains in the river,
Right.
and when flooding happens, it goes over the wall,
Right. Right.
which is what we've seen.
Yeah.
So you have to realize that all answers will not come from science itself.
Right.
Innovation or technology
Mm.
can only do so much.
Yeah. But more than science, obviously, I mean, we depend too much on scientists and technologists. But does the government need to? Because it's like a loop. Almost every year we see the same thing. I mean, when the rain comes, the same what he said. I mean, the Mithi River gets flooded because of the rain, and then we have a problem. I mean, even the least amount of rain floods the entire city.
You have to understand one thing. When a system like government is working, it needs to justify its own existence.
Right.
So if it doesn't happen every year, where that money will go? Where that man will go?
Right.
So it needs to justify itself.
Right.
So it's a problem because of the system, not otherwise.
Right.
When the community do it,
Right.
they don't do it because what will happen next year?
Right.
If the Mithi River is completely cleaned up,
Right.
let me put it this way, where is that Mithi River Authority will go? Isn't it?
Yeah.
If you don't have a reason
Yeah.
to create a structure,
Right.
or you created a structure for a certain reason, now
Right.
that reason is gone, where the structure will go?
We'd be more than happy without the structure and a cleaner.
No, see, you are outside that structure, but people within living within that structure
Right.
also have to think of their own sustainability, no?
Right.
So they will create a solution that will be slow and steady and make different way impact.
Right.
They have to show impact, otherwise next year their money doesn't come.
Right.
So they will show impact.
Right.
So someday they will blast the bed of the river or do different stuffs. which doesn't really solve the problem.
Right.
But they will show that we have done so many things.
Completely. But do you think we need communities and organizations like yourself coming together and addressing the government that there is enough is enough? I mean, we as common people need a better city, a better life, and we obviously need a better environment. And we should start right now, because this is the planet that we have. Right? This is the city we have. Now, to make it sustainable and better, we need to start working right now. Or are we just waiting for it to come to a point where there is no reverse?
But if you want to change,
Right.
you can change.
Right.
And human capacity is so astounding
Right.
in adapting itself to the new environment.
Right.
The moment you realize that it is for your own sustainability or your own existence,
Right.
you will start doing things. So, but there are, at the same time, there are people who are stuck in their ways of doing things.
Right.
So they will say, no matter what, I'll still produce the cars with diesel engine,
Right.
or I will produce bottled water, come what may happen to the
Right.
the plastic that is waste, creating waste after the bottled water is consumed.
Right.
So there are people of that
Right.
type, and
Will
there are
always
people-
exist. Right.
So, so to answer your question, simply yes and no.
Right.
Both are possibilities.
Right.
Now it's for us to decide which direction we take.
Right. Completely.
And the more we learn about it,
Right.
the more it will make sense for us to reverse that process.
Completely.
And it's actually a common sense.
Right.
You want to survive.
Right.
I mean, every human has a nature that it wants to survive. So the moment you start realizing the only way the survival is possible is this, then you will start adapting yourself to that process.
Completely. Completely.
So I'm very I have big hopes on humanity,
Right.
which is what is making those changes that you gave examples of,
Right.
the river or the seashore or rainwater harvesting. Rainwater harvesting is not a big science.
Right.
It's a very simple science. It just says the conserve water. The rainwater which is flown and wasted,
Right.
you restrict it
Right.
and then reuse it.
Right.
So, but because we had water, in most cases actually free water, given by government to our doorsteps, we don't worry.
Yeah.
The day we will not have that water, we will start worrying, we will start talking.
Yeah, completely. Just the outskirts of Bombay, if you go, there are these people who are deprived of water because all the water gets diverted over here. So thank you, Dr. Shrikar. It was a pleasure talking to you. Got to know so much about the environment, and your passion comes through. Thank you for being on the show with us. If you want to know any details of Dr. Shrikar, I'll add it below on the link. You can get onto the social websites or LinkedIn. And if you like what you see, please press the subscribe button, and see you guys next time. Thank you.